Hello, welcome back, and as always, I hope you're doing well. Right, before I start, guys, this is a subjective conversation, so you're going to have people that agree with me, you're going to have people that don't agree with me. So in the comments, let's just keep it nice, shall we? It is subjective, no one really knows, but I wanted to cover a subject. Now, what does Michael J. White, Shale Sonnen, Dewey Ramsey, Gene LaBelle, Michael Bisping, Bob Wall, and even Chuck Norris have in common?
But he was not a fighter. I'm sorry. It's a whole different skill set.
No, I was a professional fighter. I fought professionally then, and Bruce was very, very good, but he never fought in the ring.
Really?
He never fought in the ring.
Bruce always said he taught Chuck, Joe, me, everybody, and we were all professional fighters. Bruce never had
They all thought Bruce really couldn't fight. I'm going off of this Bruce Lee Real Fights, The Wrath of the Dragon, written by John Little, who'd done some real deep research. And if I could, I'd send all of these people a copy of the book. But they all say, he was a movie actor fighter and stuff like that, and he wasn't. I mean, they don't slag him off. Michael J. White says he's a hero. Gene LaBelle says he was a wonderful guy. But they don't think he's a real fighter. Anyway, I got a comment a couple of weeks ago by Chris Buck, and I want to go through his comments with you, and maybe we can open up a discussion about it. I'll be interested to know your views on this anyway. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Hi Stripey, since you bought the Wrath of the Dragon book, in this clip there is something to add, and I'll give you John Little's account from a new podcast about the subject matter Bruce Lee versus Muhammad Ali. The podcast is called Carved Out of Stone. It's got John Little and Randy Roach in it, and I will put a link down below. It's a fairly long podcast, but John Little really has an insight. Now, bearing in mind, John Little has wrote numerous books about Bruce Lee over the years, and this last one, Bruce Lee's Real Fights, gives you an insight to the man who could actually fight. Now, we're not talking about fighting in a ring, where there's rules and stuff like that, either boxing. Even people say he wouldn't last with a mixed martial artist. Well, I watch UFC every week, or whenever it's on anyway. Me and the wife are huge fans of the UFC. We love watching it. But, in all fairness, when someone gets kicked in the groin, they get 5 minutes to recover. Sometimes people get jabbed in the eyes, or a finger poke in the eyes, not particularly a jab in the eyes, finger poke in the eyes, and sometimes the fights get called off. Because you scratch the cornea, the eye starts twitching, it shuts up, you can't see. Bear all them things in mind. Right, and he wrote this chapter in the book, The Wrath of the Dragon, but he ended up taking it out because it wasn't about sparring or about fighting, it was only about rumours. Right, the first time the notion of what would happen if Bruce had duked it out with Muhammad Ali appeared in Linda Lee Cadwell's book titled The Life and Tragic Death of Bruce Lee, published in England in 1975. We all had that book. And in that book, Linda presents the following statement. One critic wrote, who watched him, would bet on Lee to render Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali's previous name before he converted to Islam, would render Cassius Clay senseless if they were put in a room and told anything goes. Now, bearing in mind, Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest of all time, was a boxer. Sure, he was a big boxer, and this is another thing. Before I get started, Michael J. White stands on this all the time. He says, but he's a bigger guy. Well, I've seen countless videos of smaller guys just knocking big guys out, and it does happen. I would give him that most times it does go the other way, but if you've got a skilled fighter, he could get out of the way, We'll get to all this stuff anyway, but, anything goes, not just boxing. We're talking about a real fight. And before I go as well, talking to the UFC, it's in my head, They talk about how hard their training camps are. They always talk about how hard their training camps were, building up to a fight. Bruce Lee, when he was alive, trained like that every single day, all year round. You can see Chuck Norris talking about it. You know, they'd go out and work out in the backyard, and then they'd go in, and while Linda would give Chuck an iced tea, Bruce would be on the floor doing stomach crunches. You've heard Bob Wall, while they're driving along in a car, Bruce would be constantly punching a pad. He never stopped. He was almost pathological in his attitude towards a real fighting. And in the Piers Burton interview, he says, you know, when you talk about karate and all these judo and all these other martial arts, now you're talking about rules, but real fights where they finger jab to the eyes and kick into the groin, real fight situations, not in a ring with rules. We're talking about a real fight. Anyway, look at me, I'm going to take ages to get through this. Right, so it's true that Linda is quoted the reporter's opinion in this passage. She did write that opinion in that book. But 76 pages later in the same book, Linda writes, not quoting anybody, "It has often been argued that if Bruce were locked in a room with Muhammad and both were allowed to fight in their usual styles, then Bruce would bound to have been the winner." Both of these statements make the same point, that Bruce Lee would have defeated Muhammad Ali if they'd fought for real. Linda didn't need to include these two statements in her book, but the fact remains that she did. The question is, if Lee didn't believe this to be the case, then why did she seek out the first quote above and then add a second one of her own? After all, Linda's book has no shortages of praise for the martial artist. Every strike, discipline, each testifies to her late husband's martial arts prowess, and she could have just left it out altogether. The reporter's quote appeared in Linda's book for a reason, and her reason was that her seconding of the reporter's statement indicates that she, Linda, as a representative of Bruce Lee, concurred with the opinion he expressed. But what did Bruce Lee himself say about the matter? Did anyone get a quote directly from him? One man attempted, the Hong Kong journalist John Hardy, who in a November 1971 interviewed Lee in an article for the Hong Kong Star newspaper. Hardy: how did he fancy himself in a ring against Cassius Clay? Bruce: if you put gloves on, then you're dealing with rules, and you must know the rules to survive, but in the street, you have more tools in your favour: the kick, the throw, the punch. Lee had no interest in fighting Ali in a boxing ring. That would have required him to leave the majority of his weapons behind. No kicks, jab into the eyes, kick into the groin, whatever. His answer suggests that in the street, the advantages and thus chances of winning would fall to the man who brought most weapons to the fight. That sounds feasible. Lee, with his arsenal of kicks, throws and punches, would have more weapons than Ali, who would have only had 2 fists. The reader is free to connect the dots here. As this quote was published 2 years before Bruce's death, there is no evidence that such a letter to the editor suggests that he believed he was misquoted in the matter. So this quote can stand as indicating Lee's opinion on how he believed he would fare against Ali. So basically, this, in 1971, this went out, and if Bruce see it in the newspaper, I thought, I shouldn't have said that really. He would have wrote a letter to him saying, take that, you know, you misquoted me, I didn't mean that. But he didn't. Right. It is also, and this is important to note, the only quote attributed to Lee on the matter of him fighting Ali that was published during his lifetime. All the others, like, now this is a famous quote, "My small Chinese hands, Ali would kill me," by Robert Klaus, Bolo Young and John Saxon, was published after Bruce Lee had died. This was all after Bruce's death in 73. And then there was another fella, Bob Bremer. Bremer was obviously one of Lee's students. You can see clips of Bob Bremer on YouTube, and you can see photos of him with Bruce, so he knew Bruce. And Bremer said, "Yes, I heard that from Bruce's own mouth. Lee, if we were in the street, I would beat the crap out of him. But in the ring, not so good." Bremer said he believed it, that is Bruce, and I believed it. Now you've heard...
My experience with Bruce was as a street fighter. I was never a tournament player. All I knew was a fight. Now, I didn't fight relative to size and weight and division. It was a fight against person. Now, if the person was 135 or 335, it didn't matter. It was a fight between two people, and whoever was standing would win. Well, Bruce, 135 against Jim DeMille, 225, Ed Hart, 240, 250, professional boxer, kill you with either hand, Jesse Glover, super athlete, judo, karate, all of us street fighters, Bruce could beat us all. And I don't mean it would be a struggle. I mean, he could beat us all and we didn't have a chance.
You've seen that, and if you haven't, check it out. It's on one of my shows. And he said, Bruce could beat us all. We didn't have a chance. Because Bruce was very quick, obviously. Right, so, John Little. I do know that he'd gone to dinner with Senator John Tunney, who was the son of Gene Tunney. I didn't know these people were. But Gene Tunney defeated Jack Dempsey in the famous long count fight heavyweight championship fight. And I've seen this footage, and that Gene Tunney looked like a mean son of a gun. And John Tunney asked Bruce, what do you think of my dad? Do you know anything about my dad, Gene Tunney? And Bruce said, yeah, I don't just know about him. I have 2 books about him. John Tunney replied, cool. How do you think you would have done against my dad? And Bruce said, well, if I stood there and he hit me, forget it. But the question is, could he ever get close to me? So John Tunney replied, so you think you could beat him? And Bruce replied, to tell you the truth, I could beat anyone in the world in a street fight. Okay, so John Little comes back with, Ali was big and strong, and Bruce was smart enough to recognise that if he went into Ali's backyard, a boxing ring, and there were rules, he would be a smudge, but on the street, it's something else. Now, Bruce trained for street fighting, hence the constant. We've all seen how quick his finger jabs are. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And here's another interesting thing that speaks to that for anyone who says, well, Ali in a street fight would have done something to Bruce. Muhammad Ali studied a little bit of Taekwondo for a short time under June Rhee. We all know June Rhee. He took Bruce to the Dominican Republic. And June was a friend of Bruce. And June often said, quote, sparring Bruce was a waste of time because he couldn't get out of first gear, and Bruce taught me this punch, which was so fast and so direct, there is nothing I could do to get out of the way of it. I couldn't block it, so I asked him to show me, and he did. And he shared it with Ali, and Ali called it the acupunch. John Little carries on. June Rhee said the same. Ali couldn't block it, and Rhee was able to hit Ali with it. And Ali was so impressed with it that he used it in one of his fights against Richard Dunn, and I think he knocked the guy out with it. But here's the thing. June Rhee was not as fast as Bruce Lee. He didn't hit as hard as Bruce Lee, and June Rhee was able to hit Muhammad Ali with his acupunch. So, could Bruce have hit Ali? Yeah. Could he have hit harder than June Rhee? Yeah. Was Bruce's technique in a real fight to bob and weave and throw jabs? Nope. It was to go for the eyes, the throat, or the lead shin. The finger jab to the eyes, that in UFC often stops a fight. They certainly get time to, sort it out. As well as, imagine getting a jab to the eye and then a kick to the groin and then whatever else. Anyway, I digress. And this is John Little quoting again. And if you take someone's eyes away, Bruce Lee's closing speed was insane. He practiced finger jabs to the eyes repeatedly, like thousands of repetitions to get the neuromuscular pathways down, so he could do it effortlessly. So yeah, in a boxing ring, Ali all day, but in the street, I think Lee is the favourite. It's subjective, I know, but it does make you think, it does. Now, he does put a PS at the end of this, and he says, this is from me, Chris. Of course, the final line in John Little's opinion, nobody has to agree, but as you can read in the complete text, during Lee's lifetime, he only spoke one time about this subject in front of a journalist. All the claims later by Robert Klaus, Bolo Young, John Saxon, among the quotes famous for "look at my small hands, Ali would kill me," were published after Lee was gone. And the same goes, of course, for the quote from his student Bob Bremer, you know, that Lee told him that he would beat the crap out of Ali in a street fight. Now, it's well worth listening to the podcast, I think. I really, really do. I mean, he goes on about the Tarantino film, and I will do my own video on this at some stage. Just finding time to do everything. He goes on about Gene LaBelle, who apparently taught Bruce Lee for a year grappling. Although John Little says in Bruce Lee's dailies. Now, bearing in mind, John Little had access to all of Bruce Lee's dailies. So everything that Bruce Lee was doing, meetings and all that, even up to the final day in his dailies, he was going to go and meet George Lazenby and Betty Ting Pei and Raymond Chow to talk about Game of Death stuff. Bruce was a prolific writer and he wrote a daily journal, and John Little had access to them. There's no mention of Gene LaBelle in there. No training with him for a year, no phone number. We know he met Bruce. I think he was definitely in the Green Hornet, and he was also, I think, in the episode that Bruce Lee was in of Ironside. But how close they were and all that, I know Gene says great guy, but it's very general. He covers all these subjects, John Little, and the guy knows his stuff. This book should be sent out to all of these. Michael J. White, read this, have a read. It's clickbaity, I know, and so is this video, because it is a very divisive subject. Would Bruce Lee beat Muhammad Ali? Muhammad Ali, and I love Ali, by the way. I absolutely love Muhammad Ali. But it's a subjective argument. In a boxing ring, Bruce openly admits he wouldn't have a chance. But in the street, where he could finger jab to the eyes, shin kick, groin kick, whatever, what goes on in a real fight, not in UFC. Now, UFC is amazing. You know, they use elbows, they use it pretty much everything, but you can't jab them in the eyes. They often get, you know, keep your fingers clenched or point to the ceiling. You can't have them sort of like going forward. And like I said earlier, we've seen Bruce's speed when it comes to the finger jabs. And also, would you be able to touch him? Because I've heard countless people say he couldn't get close. I've done another short recently of Kobe Bryant talking about Kareem trying to spar with Bruce. He was like a rabbit. He just couldn't get close to him. So, and we're talking about real fights. I know Chuck Norris said he was a real fighter. He done point karate. So if someone's got hit, get stopped for a minute and then they reset and go again. I'm not taking anything away from Chuck. But is that real fighting? It is martial arts, and Chuck is great. He's done a lot of good stuff. But is that real fighting? I don't care who you are. I think you get a good kick between the legs, you're useless. I don't care who you are. And certainly a jab to the eyes. And I've seen it countless times in the UFC. So yeah, I just wanted to go through that with you and give you a little bit of my views on all of this. Now, it's subjective. There's going to be people who say Ali would beat the granny out of Bruce Lee. And there are Bruce Lee fans that go, maybe not in a real fight. And that's what Bruce Lee was exploring, you know, real fighting. And that's probably why he didn't do competition. Probably. Anyway, I'd like to know your opinions. What do you think? I highly recommend you watch this Carved Out of Stone channel. It's quite long, a couple of hours long. But John Little, I'd love to interview him at some stage, but I think that's the last book he's going to do on Bruce. But he has done some great work where Bruce Lee's concerned, and because he had access to the Lee Foundation and all of Bruce Lee's stuff, he knows. It's not the size of the man in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the man. And Bruce had that determination going on. Anyway, right. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think Bruce was just a hot mouth or a hothead? Do you think all these people are right? You know, the Chael Sonnens, Michael Bispings, Dewey Ramsey, Michael J. White. I mean, I was a little bit disappointed with Bob Wall and Chuck Norris. I was a little bit disappointed when I hear him go, Bruce weren't a real fighter, or Bob Wall would say, oh, he's the greatest film fighter. I'll get a little bit like, really, Bob? Come on. But anyway, this video's gone on too long, so I'm going to wrap it up. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. What do you think? John Little's definitely got his opinion. I'm still not sure, but I think Bruce would have had in a real fight. Anyway, I'm going to leave that with you. Well, I'm going to try and pull this together, and hopefully it'll be out Monday / Tuesday. Have an amazing week, guys. Much love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with another ramble real soon. Take care now.